Greetings and welcome to another impressions video here at Words About Games, and today we're going to be looking at The Division 2. The Division 2 is the latest live service loot shooter, this time dressed up as a political third-person, cover-based shooter. The sequel takes players to Washington DC as the virus that started in New York has ravaged the rest of the United States. You'll need to assist what's left of the leadership of America in rebuilding as violent groups of insurgents threaten to take advantage of the situation for their own purposes, which generally means being domestic terrorists, including fighting for territory, public executions, broadcasting propaganda, and more. Except that's not really what The Division 2 is actually about. The story and actions you and the NPCs in the game take are fairly ludicrous, especially in the face of Ubisoft's insistence that this isn't a political game. This is a game where it's best not to think about what's actually going on in the story for more than a few seconds at a time, because that will probably dampen your enjoyment of the game if you do so. Instead, The Division 2 is all about shooting enemies, completing quests, and getting new gear. You know, standard loot shooter stuff. And in this, it's oddly compelling. I say oddly because it's difficult to put into words quite why it's so compelling. There isn't anything I'd say was particularly excellent about the game, and plenty of issues I could mention. Yet, whenever I'm not playing it, or when I've got a little free time, I generally boot up The Division 2 for a quest or two. The Division 2 is competent in most of the things it does. The core combat loop is pretty traditional for a third-person cover-based shooter, albeit with enemies that can take a heck of a lot more damage than an enemy in your average shooter. How this works is, you'll embark on a quest or participate in an activity, fight waves of bad guys with red health bars, who are your bog standard bad guys that are easy enough to take down. Eventually, some enemies with purple health bars will get mixed in. They'll have armor that you'll need to break before you can do damage, and will have special abilities. Finally, a boss enemy with a gold health bar will show up. These guys have even tougher armor and will require a lot of damage before you could even touch their health. And that's The Division 2 in a nutshell. Aside from one or two memorable side missions, you'll spend the majority of your time moving through corridors until you reach a more open area with lots of cover and initiate these wave-based fights. And yet, I'm never bored during this. Despite the repetitive nature of the encounters, there's a decent amount of satisfaction to be found in this loop. Higher tier enemies are bullet sponges for sure, but they're manageable, even when playing solo, which was a major complaint I had with the original Division, and most other loot shooters if I'm being honest. In fact, in the 13 hours I've played The Division 2, I've never run into an obstacle that didn't feel doable as someone playing by yourself. Part of this is down to how well designed the AI is. Sure, sometimes enemies make dumb choices and do dumb things, but they're also consistent. Movement is a big deal in The Division 2. In a small but incredibly neat twist, enemies won't psychically know where you are at all times, so flanking and shifting your position is both a viable tactical move and incredibly satisfying when you manage to pull it off. You'll constantly be finding new and improved loot as you play, which helps keep the experience feel consistent. New guns keep enemy health bars draining at about the same speed, and new armor generally lets me take the same amount of damage. Even if you stick to waiting for specific weapon types to drop, you'll never feel like you're falling behind on the invisible power curve of The Division 2's combat. This is especially true if you venture out into the Dark Zone, where the enemies are tougher, the loot is better, and other players are as likely to try to kill you as they are to team up with you. While the intense standoffs or epic stories of betrayal that the game originally promised never really happened, it's pretty neat to venture into the lawless frontier, teaming up with strangers and fighting off others. And the vastly superior loot drops make trips there worth it every few levels, especially if you're soloing the rest of the content and looking for a power boost. Experimenting with the different shade abilities offers some variation on your tactics. As you progress, you can keep unlocking new tech and new variations on existing abilities, with automated turrets, healing drones, chemical launchers, and more offering a very flexible path to letting you create your own personal playstyle. I'm also enjoying rebuilding the world of The Division 2's Washington DC. While the narrative is generally terrible, reclaiming territory through capturing control points makes you feel like you're actually having an impact on the state of the world. Completing side missions and projects for settlements is also really satisfying, as the rewards for doing so are tangible. Recovering batteries for the theatre settlement, for example, will add power to the community, and it's really neat to watch the settlements grow and change as you complete tasks for them. The only thing that's frustrating right now, aside from the fact that you can't use the word LGBT to create a clan, and the game defaults to male pronouns even if you're playing a female character, are the bugs. Massive have stamped out the more egregious ones quite quickly, but I'm still plagued by game crashes or my gun's recoil going down instead of up, for example. It's nothing that outright ruins the game, but it can be momentarily frustrating when you run into them. The Division 2 is not an exceptional game by any stretch of the imagination, but it's certainly doing something right, as I've sunk a bunch of time into it, and will be sinking a bunch more in before I'm done. The shooting, progression, loot, and everything else is all fine, but when put together, The Division 2 becomes more than the sum of its competent parts and is actually quite a satisfying game to play. Thank you very much for watching this video, guys. If you've enjoyed it, please keep it here at Words About Games. We've got tons of content, including our weekly podcast, more impressions videos, patch notes, and our weekly indie game of the week. We also stream over on Twitch at twitch.tv/wordsaboutgames every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday. And most importantly, have a great day.